The text came while I was standing alone inside the Navy retirement hall, staring at 3 empty seats in the front row. One for my father, one for my mother, one for my younger brother. Seats I had personally reserved 6 months earlier. My retirement ceremony was scheduled to begin in less than 20 minutes. 26 years in the United States Navy, 3 deployments, 2 combat zones, thousands of days away from home. And yet, those seats remained empty. Then, my phone buzzed. Dad. I smiled. Finally. Maybe they were running late. Maybe traffic. Maybe a flat tire. Maybe, for once, they had actually chosen me. I opened the message. My smile disappeared instantly. Your brother's barbecue is packed. Everybody came. We'll catch up with you next week. I stared at the screen. A second message arrived. Your brother spent a lot of money on this event. Don't make it a thing. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. 26 years. 26 years of service. And my family had skipped my retirement ceremony for a backyard barbecue? Across the room, sailors chatted quietly while families took photos beneath American flags. Someone laughed, someone hugged their daughter, someone's father proudly adjusted a Navy pin on his son's uniform. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. My family had never once celebrated my accomplishments. Not my promotions, not my deployments, not my medals, not even the years I spent risking my life overseas. Because in their minds, I would always be the dependable son, the one who never complained, the one who always understood, the one who always came back. My phone buzzed again. Dad, your brother really needs our support today. I looked at the message, then I slowly typed 7 words. Words that changed everything. Then let him support you instead. The truth was, my family had no idea what was about to happen, because 20 minutes later, an Admiral walked into that room, and my father would spend the rest of his life wishing he had chosen differently. My name is Michael Walker, and this is the story of how my family skipped my Navy retirement ceremony and lost everything they thought they knew about me. Growing up in Tennessee, my father only cared about one thing: football. If football wasn't involved, he wasn't interested. My younger brother Jake figured that out early. Jake was the golden child. Star quarterback, homecoming king, everyone's favorite. Dad treated him like a local celebrity. Meanwhile, I was the quiet kid, the kid who preferred books, the kid who spent Saturdays helping veterans at the local VFW instead of attending parties. Dad used to laugh whenever people asked about me. Michael's a good boy, he'd say. Then he'd immediately start talking about Jake. At 18, Jake crashed Mom's SUV. Dad called it bad luck. At 21, Jake dropped out of college. Dad blamed the professors. No matter what happened, Jake always had an excuse, always had support, always had another chance. I learned early that life worked differently for me. If I succeeded, it was expected. If Jake succeeded, it was celebrated. So I stopped looking for approval. At 19, I joined the United States Navy. Dad barely reacted. You sure? That's your big plan? That was it. No congratulations, no pride, nothing. Meanwhile, when Jake started selling grills at a local hardware store, Dad threw him a party. Funny how life works. The son serving his country got a shrug. The son selling charcoal got a celebration. I left anyway, and honestly, the Navy saved me. For the first time in my life, effort mattered, discipline mattered, character mattered. Nobody cared who your father was, nobody cared who your brother was. You earned respect, or you didn't. By 30, I was a chief petty officer. By 40, I was overseeing operations involving millions of dollars in equipment and hundreds of personnel. People trusted me, respected me, relied on me. everything my father never did. Yet, somehow, every time I returned home, nothing changed. Jake remained the center of the universe. 5 years before my retirement ceremony, Dad's roofing business nearly collapsed. A supplier sued him. A major contract disappeared. The bank threatened foreclosure. Dad panicked. Jake disappeared. Guess who got the phone call? Me. I was stationed in Virginia at the time. Dad sounded desperate. I just need temporary help. Temporary. Funny word. I wired $35,000. Dad cred. Promised he'd pay me back. Promised he'd never forget. 3 weeks later, he told relatives Jake had helped save the business. Jake. The man who wasn't even there. I said nothing, because that's what I always did. I absorbed it, moved on, kept helping. Over the years, there were dozens of other situations. Medical bills, property taxes, emergency repairs, Mom's surgery, Jake's divorce, Jake's second divorce, Jake's failed restaurant, Jake's failed landscaping company, Jake's failed trucking business. Every time, I quietly stepped in. Every time, someone else received the credit. Eventually, I stopped expecting gratitude, but part of me still hoped. Maybe retirement would be different. Maybe, after 26 years, my father would finally show up. I should have known better. 6 months before retirement, I mailed invitations. Professional, elegant, simple. The ceremony would take place at Naval Station Norfolk. Several senior officers planned to attend. Friends from across my career would be there, including people I'd served beside for decades. Dad called 2 days after receiving the invitation. That's a long drive. 7 hours. I laughed. Dad, you've driven farther for Jake's fishing tournaments. Silence. Then he changed the subject. I ignored the warning sign. I wanted to believe. A mistake. A big one. Because 3 weeks later, Jake announced his annual summer barbecue. Guess what day he picked? The exact day of my retirement ceremony. Same date, same weekend, same time. When Mom mentioned it during a family call, I thought she was joking. She wasn't. Jake laughed. Dang, that's awkward. Awkward? I nearly choked. Dad immediately defended him. He booked vendors already. I stared at the phone. So did the United States Navy. Nobody laughed. The next month became unbearable. Family group chats exploded with barbecue planning. Photos, menus, beer selections, live music, guest lists, every day. Nobody discussed my retirement. Not once. Then relatives started calling. Not to congratulate me, to negotiate. Couldn't you move the ceremony? One aunt actually asked. Move it? A federal military retirement ceremony? I almost dropped my phone. Another cousin suggested watching online. Dad agreed. You know, technology is pretty good nowadays. That's when I understood. They weren't choosing between two events. They had already chosen. I just hadn't accepted it yet. 3 days before retirement, I received the final confirmation. Dad called. We talked about it. My stomach sank. We? The family. Of course. The family. The same people who never showed up for me. Dad cleared his throat. Jake's barbecue means a lot to everybody. I closed my eyes. And my retirement doesn't? Long silence. Then he said the sentence that shattered something inside me. Then let him support you today. I remember staring at my office wall for nearly 30 seconds, because there it was, the truth that had followed me my entire life. Jake was loved because he needed things. I was ignored because I survived without them. And for the first time, I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining. I stopped hoping. Instead, I started preparing. The morning of my retirement ceremony arrived wrapped in gray Atlantic clouds and a cool coastal breeze rolling across Naval Station Norfolk. I woke before sunrise. Not because I was nervous, because I already knew. They weren't coming. Somewhere in Tennessee, my father was probably helping Jake set up folding chairs. Somewhere my mother was arranging side dishes. Somewhere relatives were laughing and preparing for a barbecue, while I stood alone, preparing to close a chapter that had defined most of my adult life. 26 years. Gone in a single morning. I adjusted my dress uniform carefully in the mirror. Every ribbon, every medal, every insignia. Each one represented years of sacrifice, years my family barely acknowledged. My phone remained silent. No good luck message, no apology, nothing. And strangely enough, it didn't hurt anymore, because the night before, something inside me had finally gone quiet. The hope was gone. The ceremony hall slowly filled with people. Families, friends, active duty personnel, retired veterans, children running between rows of chairs, proud spouses taking photographs, excited parents. I smiled politely and greeted people as they arrived, yet my eyes kept drifting toward the front row. 3 empty seats, reserved, waiting, unclaimed. My commanding officer walked over and quietly sat beside me. Captain Harrison had served with me for nearly 8 years. Good man, sharp man, the kind of leader people trusted. He glanced toward the empty seats, then back at me. "They still coming?" I smiled. "No, sir." His jaw tightened slightly. "I see." He didn't ask another question. Didn't need to. Military people understand disappointment better than most. 10 minutes before the ceremony began, my phone buzzed. Jake. For a second, I considered ignoring it. Instead, I answered. Loud music exploded through the speaker. People cheering. Country music. Laughter. The barbecue. Jake sounded drunk already. "Hey, big brother." I closed my eyes. "What do you need?" He laughed. "Dang, don't sound so excited." "What do you need, Jake?" Another laugh. Then came the sentence that finally killed every remaining illusion. "Dad says you're upset." I stared at the floor. "No." "Good, because everybody's here." Everybody. The word echoed. Everybody. Except me. Jake continued. "Honestly, man, retirement isn't that big a deal. You're just done working." For several seconds, I said nothing. Then, I ended the call. The ceremony began at precisely 10 a.m. A Navy band played softly. Guests stood. Colors were presented. The national anthem echoed through the hall. And despite everything, I felt proud. Not because my family was there, because I was. Because nobody could take those 26 years away from me. Nobody. The speeches started. My commanding officer spoke first, then a former executive officer, then several sailors I had mentored over the years. Each one shared stories, moments, lessons, memories. Some funny, some emotional. One young lieutenant nearly cried while describing how I'd helped him through a deployment after his wife passed away. The room grew quiet. People listened. Really listened. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Then something unexpected happened. The ceremony coordinator hurried toward the stage, whispered something into Captain Harrison's ear. His eyebrows shot upward. Immediately, the entire atmosphere changed. Officers stood straighter. Senior enlisted personnel exchanged confused looks. The captain adjusted his uniform, then turned toward the entrance. Everyone followed his gaze. The doors opened, and an admiral walked inside. Not just any admiral. Vice Admiral Robert Mitchell, a 3-star admiral, one of the most respected officers in the Navy. The room went completely silent. I blinked, confused. What was he doing here? The Admiral wasn't scheduled to attend. Nobody expected him. Yet there he was, walking directly toward the stage. The captain approached him quickly. They exchanged a few words. Then both men looked toward me. My stomach tightened. What was happening? The Admiral stepped to the podium. The room remained silent. Then he smiled. "Good morning." A few nervous laughs. "I apologize for arriving unexpectedly." More silence. The Admiral looked directly at me, then said something I will never forget. "I heard today a remarkable sailor was retiring." The room turned toward me, and I felt it would be a mistake not to attend. I froze, completely froze. The Admiral began telling stories I had never heard. Operations, missions, deployments, decisions, leadership moments. Apparently, reports involving my work had reached levels far above anything I realized. Then came the biggest shock. The Admiral held up a folder. This man saved the Navy nearly $40 million during a logistics restructuring project. Murmurs spread through the room. I had forgotten about that project. To me, it was just another assignment. The Admiral continued. He prevented operational failures during 2 overseas deployments. Another pause. Then his voice softened, and he did it while never once seeking recognition. The room erupted in applause. People stood. Not everyone, everybody. I sat frozen, because suddenly I understood. These people knew me. Not the version my family ignored, the real version, the one who stayed late, the one who solved problems, the one who carried responsibility, the one who mattered. The Admiral stepped down from the podium, walked directly toward me, then shook my hand. "Thank you for your service, Master Chief Walker." The room stood again, louder this time, longer, and for a brief moment, I thought about those 3 empty seats, about my father, about Jake, about everything they were missing. Then my phone started vibrating, non-stop, message after message, call after call. Dad, Mom, Jake, relatives, everyone. I ignored them. The ceremony wasn't over. But apparently the barbecue had discovered something. An hour later, I learned what happened. One of my cousins had been scrolling Facebook during the barbecue. Someone at the ceremony had uploaded photos, then videos, then clips of the Admiral speaking. The videos exploded. Relatives started watching. Guests started asking questions. People realized this wasn't an ordinary retirement. This was a major military honor. And suddenly, everyone at Jake's barbecue wanted to know why they weren't there. The first voicemail came from Dad. "Michael, call me." The second sounded more desperate. "Son, nobody told us it was this important." I laughed, actually laughed. Because 26 years hadn't been important, why would today suddenly matter? 3 days later, I returned home. Life should have gone back to normal. Instead, things got worse. Because relatives had questions. Questions my father couldn't answer. Questions Jake couldn't answer. Questions that forced them to confront something uncomfortable. Why had they chosen a barbecue over a once-in-a-lifetime military retirement? Nobody had a good answer. Especially not Dad. 2 weeks later, Dad showed up at my house, alone. Older. Smaller, somehow. The confidence he'd carried my entire life seemed gone. We sat on my back porch, overlooking the water. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he finally said it. I messed up. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time in my life, he seemed human. Not larger than life. Not intimidating. Just an aging father confronting his mistakes. I thought there would be another ceremony. His voice cracked. I almost smiled. "No, Dad. There wasn't. He stared at his hands. I didn't understand. That sentence hit harder than I expected, because maybe he truly didn't. Maybe he'd spent so many years focusing on Jake's problems that he'd stopped seeing my accomplishments. Maybe he'd confused independence with invulnerability. Maybe he'd convinced himself I didn't need him. Then he asked a question. A simple question. One that broke my heart. Were you waiting for me to show up? I laughed, softly. Not because it was funny, because the answer was obvious. For 26 years I had been waiting for approval, waiting for pride, waiting to matter, waiting for my father to see me. Yeah, I admitted.
His eyes filled with tears. The old man looked away, and for the first time in my life, my father cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just silently. The way men cry when they finally understand something too late. After several minutes, he whispered, "I was proud of you." I nodded. "I know." "You do?" I smiled sadly. "That's the problem, Dad." He looked confused. "I didn't need you to feel proud," I said softly. "I needed you to show it." The words hit him like a freight train, because finally, he understood. Strong sons still need fathers. Independent sons still need support. Dependable sons still need love. Being capable doesn't mean being invisible. Before he left, Dad stopped at the porch steps, turned back, and quietly said, "I'm sorry I missed it. Years too late, but real. For once, real." After he drove away, I sat alone watching the sunset reflect across the water. My phone buzzed. One final message. "Dad." 3 simple words. "I'm proud, son." I stared at the screen, then smiled, because sometimes justice isn't watching people fail. Sometimes justice is finally being seen. And after 26 years, I finally was. The end.